Welcome to Legends of the Flame, where guardian dragons watch over the night, and every story is told in calm and quiet light. Beyond the green hills and old forests, where a winding road followed the river toward a distant valley, there stood a castle of dark gray stone. Its towers had watched over the countryside for longer than anyone could remember. Ivy climbed its oldest walls, wooden banners hung beneath the battlements, and a great arched gate opened each morning to welcome travelers from the villages beyond. For most of the day, the castle was filled with gentle activity. Carts rolled across the stone courtyard, horses rested beside wooden troughs. Bakers carried warm loaves from their ovens, while merchants arranged baskets beneath canvas awnings. From open windows came the sounds of conversation, footsteps, and occasionally the soft ringing of a distant bell. But as evening approached, everything began to slow. The final carts passed beneath the gate. Lanterns were lit along the walls. Stable doors were closed. Shutters were drawn, and the warm glow of hearth fires appeared behind the windows of the houses gathered below the castle hill. And above the great wooden gate, resting upon a broad ledge of ancient stone, a dragon raised his head. His name was Gatewatch Sentinel. His scales were dark as the castle walls themselves, layered across his powerful body like plates of weathered iron. Long horns swept back from his head, and his folded wings rested upon the stone behind him. Yet there was nothing fierce in the way he watched the kingdom below. There was only patience. Gatewatch had rested upon the ledge through more evenings than anyone could count. He knew the sound of every bell in the castle tower. He knew how old the gates groaned when it closed and how the banners whispered when the wind traveled along the battlements. He knew the footsteps of the keepers making their final rounds, and the gentle clatter from the kitchens as the last dishes of the evening were put away. These sounds did not disturb him. They told him that another day was ending exactly as it should. As twilight deepened, the great wooden doors beneath him slowly swung inward. The gatekeeper crossed the courtyard one final time and looked upward. Gatewatch lowered his head slightly. No words were needed between them. There had never been any need. The keeper smiled, lifted his lantern, and disappeared through a doorway in the wall. Soon the courtyard became still. Beyond the castle, the last traces of daylight faded behind the walls. One by one, windows darkened in the village below. A farmer extinguished the lantern beside his barn. A baker covered the final loaves for morning. In a small house near the river, a family gathered close to the warmth of their hearth before climbing the stairs to bed. And all the while, Gatewatch remained above them, watching, not because danger waited beyond the walls, not because anything threatened the peaceful kingdom. He watched for a much simpler reason. Everyone deserved to sleep knowing that someone was still awake. The moon climbed slowly above the distant hills. The pale light settled across the castle towers and turned the old stone silver. Gatewatch stretched one wing before folding it carefully against his side again. From where he rested, he could see far beyond the walls. The road that had been busy during the afternoon now lay empty beneath the stars. Fields rested quietly beside hedgerows, and farther away, the dark line of the forest followed the horizon. Everything had become peaceful. Even the castle seemed to breathe more slowly at night. Gatewatch listened. The faint crackle of a torch, the rustle of a banner, the soft movement of leaves far below. And somewhere, inside one of the towers, the old bell began to ring. Once. Then silence returned. Gatewatch remembered when the bell had first been raised into the tower. He remembered ropes being pulled and people cheering when its voice sounded across the valley for the first time. He remembered the young trees planted beside the road that were now tall enough to shade travelers in summer. He remembered children who once stood beneath the castle gate and stared upward at him with wide eyes. Years later, those same children had returned with children of their own. Generations had passed beneath his wings. Seasons had painted the countryside green, gold, white, and green again. The castle had changed. Roofs had been repaired, new doors had replaced old ones, ivy had spread farther across the eastern wall. But Gatewatch remained. And because he remained, the people never wondered who watched over the quiet hours. Later that night, a gentle mist drifted up from the river. It moved across the lower fields and gathered beneath the castle hill, turning the countryside into a soft gray sea. Only the highest trees remained visible above it. Gatewatch watched the mist for a while. Then he turned toward the village. Every window was dark now, every doorway closed. Even the lantern beside the stable had finally gone out. The kingdom was asleep. Gatewatch lowered himself onto the ancient stones and allowed his long tail to rest along the wall. His eyes remained open. Above him, stars traveled slowly across the sky. There was nowhere he needed to go, nothing he needed to chase, nothing he needed to prove. His purpose was simply to remain. Hours passed quietly. The moon moved beyond the western tower, and the night grew deeper before slowly beginning to soften. At first, the change was almost impossible to notice. Then the eastern horizon became slightly lighter. Black turned to gray. Gray became pale blue. And somewhere beyond the castle wall, the first bird began to sing. Gatewatch lifted his head. Another answered from the trees near the river. Soon the mist began to thin. Fields returned. Beneath it, the old road appeared again, and the first warm light of morning touched the highest tower. Inside the castle, someone opened a door. Stable keeper crossed the courtyard carrying a lantern that was no longer needed. Smoke began curling from a chimney. The baker returned to his ovens. Then came the familiar footsteps of the gatekeeper. He walked beneath the arch, placed both hands against the heavy wooden doors, and slowly opened the castle to another morning. Before returning to his work, he looked upward. Gatewatch was still there, just as he had been through every quiet hour of the night. The keeper smiled, and Gatewatch finally closed his eyes. Below him, the kingdom awakened. People stepped into the morning, knowing only that they had slept peacefully through another night. They did not need to know how many stars had crossed the sky. They did not need to know how long the mist had rested over the fields. They did not need to know how patiently the dragon had listened to the bells, the wind, and the quiet breathing of the castle. They needed only to know that when darkness came again, they could close their doors, extinguish their lanterns, and rest. Because high above the ancient gate, upon the stones worn smooth by countless years, Gatewatch Sentinel would be there, watching while the kingdom slept. And as the night grows still, the guardians continue their watch, and their light remains with you until morning. If you enjoy calm dragon legends and quiet guardian stories, subscribe to Legends of the Flame and return again for another tale from the realms where the dragons still watch.